The nonprofit MBA purpose is to provide new business insights and fresh creative ideas for executive directors and their teams that will help them improve their organization. Here is your host, Stephen Halasnik.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Stephen Halasnik, and I will be your host for today's nonprofit MBA. Do not know us. We are the leading provider in the United States of lines of credit for nonprofits. And yes, there is a company that focuses on lines of credit for nonprofits. We've been in business for 12 years, and this is actually my 6th season doing the nonprofit MBA podcast. I think it's almost 400 episodes. And I tell you, they're just great. I mean, I am on 2 boards myself, and so I learn a lot from our guests. If you're interested in learning more about a line of credit for your nonprofit, please visit nonprofitmbapodcast.com. Again, that's nonprofitmbapodcast.com. Today and in 2023, we actually have a great sponsor. I really appreciate it. A Raise. I don't need to have sponsors, but I really like what a Raise does. I believe in it. In fact, one of the nonprofits that I'm on the board for, I'm suggesting that they look at them. A Raise, Fast Fund Online, is a cloud-based system that seamlessly integrates nonprofit fund accounting, fundraising, and payroll in a single design solution. So it's software that's specifically made for accounting for nonprofits, which to me, don't use something that's not built for nonprofits like QuickBooks. I think a Raise is something that's good for it. If you're interested in learning more, go to raise.com. It's ARAIZE.com, or call 847-261-9605 and ask for Joe Scarano, and he'll be happy to help you. Today, I am very excited to be bringing back a guest that I had before. I thought she was excellent, and I asked her to come back again. Rita Soronen from Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. For the past 30 years plus, I know, like me, after 30, you don't say 32, 35 anymore, right, Rita? Rita has worked on behalf of abused, neglected, and vulnerable children, providing leadership for local, state, and national efforts, working to improve the juvenile justice and child welfare system while striving to assure safe and permanent homes for North America's children. Leading the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, a national nonprofit public charity, since 2001, and the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption in Canada since 2004, Mrs. Soronen works to find permanent families for more than 140,000 waiting children in North America foster care systems. Rita, welcome again to the Nonprofit MBA podcast.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be back. I love this show, so thank you for having us.
Thank you. I enjoy doing it. So today's topic, running an integrated fundraising and marketing team for your nonprofit. I've really noticed that the one of the key elements of a nonprofit, that's smaller, they really have to figure this all out about building a fundraising team, a marketing team, or, really they have to attack it with gusto, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And I think it's been very traditional, especially with smaller nonprofits, that if there is a separate a fundraiser that's not just the executive director or the CEO, then all of those efforts go into the fundraising department. And frequently what we say is, we're having an event to raise funds, but it will also raise awareness for the organization. And that's absolutely true. But I think for those organizations that can begin to think about dedicating resources to a marketing professional as well, whether it's internal or external, that notion that there are particular skill sets for someone that is expert in marketing, that helps to advance the cause, that helps to establish brand identity. There are particular skill sets for a fundraiser, an expert fundraiser, but they're uniquely overlap in their tactics, in their outcomes, in their measurable metrics, and supporting each other. And so really looking at not how do we keep those departments separate, but how do we fully integrate them to get the biggest bang for the buck on promoting the cause, raising funds, and creating brand identity that then raises funds.
Did you, in your career, work for a small nonprofit?
I did. There was a point in time when I was the executive director that also did the marketing, also did the fundraising, and so it's a heavy lift. It's a burnout job, I think, for organizations where the crux of the organization relies on the ability for a single person or maybe two people to both spread the message and raise those critical dollars. It's done. It's done in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of organizations across the nation because they are limited by the kinds of funds they can use for a marketing department. It sometimes feels like, maybe not the right use of funds. The fundraising people can do that, but there really are separate skills, but then they have to be integrated.
And what do you think is the revenue mark where it gets to a point where the executive director can't do the fundraising anymore as they're, multiple of their tasks? At what point? Is it $1 million? Is it 5 million?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's one dependent on what is the strategic plan forward, what is the goal for what are the kinds of dollars that we need to raise. It takes dollars to raise dollars. We hear that all the time, but you're looking at a budget that's stretched thin already, and it's easy to say that, difficult to implement. So I think it's getting the board on task to say, we can't go past this point. And it might be that $1 million point. It might be a little bit sooner than that, but we can't get past this if we don't have the quality staff. And we might not see the results for 12 to 18 to 24 months that we really need, but that investment at that point will indeed generate results.
Yeah. So, a good example. So I'm on I'm kind of on two different boards. The one board I'm on is a very small nonprofit, and the other one's a $10 million nonprofit. And the one board I'm on is called Ween Dream. They provide free Halloween costumes to kids who can't afford them. And by the way, about 90% of them are kids in foster care. So, it's a really good cause. They're very small. They almost had no budget. They've been around for maybe I think 2012 is when they started. And they donate about 1,000 costumes a year that they collect. And then I came on board, and I suggested we start buying new costumes instead of getting to donate for a variety of reasons. So I then last year suggested, hey, I think we should start doing fundraising, right? Because it's all 100% volunteer, so it's a little different, right? And we raised $10,000. So like this year, I suggested to them, now having seen the $10 million nonprofit, I went to my first fundraising gala, which was unbelievable. The amount of money that they raise at these galas is just incredible. And so I tasked the executive director from Ween Dream to say, I think we should have a fundraiser this year, and so, I kind of see what it's like for a very small nonprofit to start to make to start thinking about the change of, hey, wait a minute, we're going to be maybe more professional in what we do. What do you think?
Yeah, and it's not just more professional. I think it's really aligning that sense of, in order to serve more of our customers, in order to build a bigger audience for the need for those customers, then we've got to do something different than solely depending on the executive director to get everything done. And there are brilliant executive directors out there that can do it. But in order to get to that next level, yes, I think it's both professionalizing. Look, if you look at any for-profit, right, and the sales department or the product development department, it can never stand alone. It's uniquely aligned with a marketing department, and that will advance whatever they decide in product development, that will advance whatever sales they've determined will make this company profitable. I think in a way we can think about that in the same way. A for-profit enterprise would never just say, I've got this great product, and so now I'm just going to sell it. Because no one will know about it, whether it's a digital advertising or public service announcements for nonprofits, whatever it is. I think it is about really looking into the future. How our goal with every nonprofit is, how can we serve the maximum number of whatever our constituents are, whether it's children waiting to be adopted or children that need Halloween costumes or children with some kind of wretched childhood disease that needs to get cured. We have to look at the end. What's the end goal? That every child will have a Halloween costume if they want one. That every child will live without the fear of childhood cancer. That every child will have a safe and permanent home. And then you step back. How are we going to get there? And I think the board plays a really critical role in this, because if you can't afford yet, as you're building your budget to afford someone that is expert in marketing, you can get an expert marketer on your board. And the reason that they're there is to help you with those conversations, with those causes, not necessarily to do all the work for you, but to help you get to that next level as well.
What do you think the sign typically is for an executive director to finally say, you know what, I can't do this anymore. I can't do all of this. I need to delegate this fundraising efforts. What is the sign? Burnout? Is it just she or he knows it's time? What do you think it is?
The signs are probably different with every organization. It's my hope that every board and every executive director, and particularly at that executive committee level, have ongoing, true and honest conversations so that an executive director doesn't feel like it's failure or an admission of lack of capacity to be able to say to their board chair or to their executive committee, this isn't going to it can't keep going this way. You're either going to lose me or we're not going to reach the goals that we need to reach. So I'm hoping that rather than trying to peek through the curtain that an executive director may put up so no one sees what's behind that curtain because they're afraid of feeling less than what the board sees in front of the curtain, that there's an honest, ongoing, transparent conversation, and that there's an environment where the executive director feels comfortable saying, here's what I propose for this budget, and you help me, but here's how I think we can get there in order to raise the funds to hire whatever staff it is that will help me move this forward. And if there's a big chasm there, if there's no bridge between those two conversations, then I think the board has to take a serious look at itself as well.
Yeah, I mean, having most of my listeners in the nonprofit media, they don't know that over 30 years I've built 7 companies. So I've seen what it's like to hire someone for a position that doesn't have any experience and where I don't have any experience. And so you have 2 people who don't have any experience and what that's like, and then take the opposite, where I hire somebody who has a lot of experience and has been successful at it. And you even forget the idea that maybe I don't even know the job well. What a difference, how much life is so much easier. And so this is a segue into me saying about hiring the right person. But, if you have somebody who's successful at fundraising somewhere else, they're going to cost a fortune, right? Yeah. And so, what are your suggestions in regards to delegating this fundraising marketing effort, as far as, how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think you have to keep in mind that indeed, you said it's small steps. So you don't have to hire necessarily your first professional fundraiser as someone that worked at a large university that was raising literally millions and millions and millions of dollars on a monthly basis, perhaps. You don't necessarily have to start with that person, but you can start with someone that understands fundraising, that is passionate about the mission. I think that's always critical. Can you see evidence about passion about this mission? And then make that investment in someone who you're willing to help grow and learn as well. And the same with the marketing piece. Lots of people come out of marketing programs in college. They may not have a lot of experience, but they've learned the techniques. They may have interned. So start with the baby steps and be willing to invest in their continued learning. Or, you say, nope, we can't do that. we're going to go ahead and we're going to get a next level fundraiser because that's what it's going to take, or we're going to get a sort of next level marketer and fundraiser tandem team. We're going to invest the dollars and we're going to go ahead and do that. If we can reasonably feel like we can find a way to get those dollars. And again, that's where the board comes in, right? The board is critical in this aspect. It's not just to go do it staff, particularly at that development level of really beginning to grow an organization, of beginning to look at the next phase of how we define ourselves as a staff. I think once that's up and running and it's fully staffed and fully functional and the results are in and you're constantly looking at results, that's a different conversation. But when it's a hands-on board, then it truly has to be hands-on. And I think that's part of that real expectations for board members.
That's my first reaction too. My first reaction is if I was tasked with this, trying to, let's say I'm an executive director, or let's say I'm on the board of a nonprofit, it's kind of like I am with Green Dream, but my first reaction would be is, let's take some baby steps. Let's at least get somebody who's going to work part-time. And let's get somebody who maybe has kids at home, a dad or a mom, who wants to get out and wants to work, and they're type A personalities, kind of go-getters, right? And then I would either do one of two things. I would either see if I have somebody on my board who is really, really good, has a professional career in marketing. And I would ask them to work together with that part-timer to mentor them. And if I don't have somebody on my board who is a marketing person, then I might be a good opportunity for me to bring someone in that I know and say, could you do me a favor? Can you help mentor this person?
Yes.
The other option is, I think two other options would be I bring a lot of coaches on this podcast. Get somebody who's a fundraising coach and coach us up, right? Coach us up. It doesn't take much. And by the way, if you're raising money, you're going to pay for your coach. It's not a big deal. Or the last one would be is to reach out to maybe a larger nonprofit who might be willing to mentor us and say, could you spend an hour or two with us, maybe every month, and kind of lead us in this direction. And so I bring that part-time person with us, but not spend a lot of money to develop the system. And the most important thing would be let's develop a process, not so much the result. I mean, those are my instincts. Do I win the Rita a seal of approval for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are perfect. They're spot on. And in fact, we have reached out to other very large nonprofits, I won't mention names, but very brand known nonprofits that everybody points to and says, wow, how did they do that? We've actually reached out to those as we were beginning to engage in something that was new to us, digital fundraising. Are you willing to talk about what you do? And most nonprofits are. They're absolutely willing to share, how they got there, what they do, what perhaps outside organizations they work with that they might recommend. So I think that reaching out is critical. We think of nonprofits as being very competitive for dollars, but we're all in different spaces. And I think even if we're in the same space, we're a really, I think, deeply honest sense of organizations that absolutely will talk to our colleagues about what we've done. I think that notion of potentially hiring a part-time, somebody that wants to get, just begin to get their foot back into perhaps working full-time is a good idea. But I also think there's the other end of the spectrum, folks who are, have reached the end perhaps of their active careers. They're not necessarily retired, but they're looking for something a little less intense than running a full fundraising team at an organization. They're willing to step back in terms of pay, but still have years of experience and lots of thought leadership skills, either for the board or for a paid position. So I think looking at both ends of those spectrums is a good idea, that you don't necessarily have to jump into $180,000 a year, prime of career professional as your first out. Yes, I think your ideas are brilliant.
And then don't use the word brilliant with me, but yeah, they were good. Anyway, and then the other option was like this is kind of leading into a question I want to ask, but I did hire I have hired some very, very incredible employees fresh out of college,
Yes.
and they were great and full of enthusiasm and determination. Just my question is, if you do hire someone out of college and they are type A personality, maybe let's say for this fundraising effort, um, what do you think the pay goes for those type of people nowadays? I know it depends on the state where I know you're in Ohio. So let's just say in Ohio, would you say 60,000?
Yeah, I think around I was going to say 60 for some experience, for an entry level, 50 to 60 depending on region of the country. That might be 70 to 80 depending on which coast you're on. Um, uh, and it always astounds me to say that because I can think of times in my life, when I was running an organization, I wasn't making that much, but the world has
Oh, it's
changed
unbelievable. You should
significantly.
see what my son
Yeah,
makes. It's
yeah.
shocking. When he told me that what the offer was, I said, well, I know when he was a senior in college, he told me, and he's a IT guy. I said, you're wrong. It can't be that much, right?
Exactly,
I get it.
exactly.
Um,
And I think it's selling it as you have the opportunity to help us build a dynamic, best in class organization and grow with us to do that. I think there are a lot of people that want to be able to put their
yeah,
fingerprint
I
on
know I
having
do.
developed a
Yeah,
department.
I know I do. I mean, I'm a little bit disappointed with Ween Dream, and they're just not kind of going for it. And I get it. It's all volunteer. So, I'm lead the horse to the water, so to speak. Um, okay, so we kind of started off. I started off smaller because a lot of our listeners are smaller nonprofits. So give us a little bit more insight as to what else you think is kind of critical in developing a very great fundraising marketing team.
I think for those larger nonprofits that may have somebody dedicated to advancing awareness of the mission and also have a fundraising department, they tend to be very bifurcated and different budget tracks in the budget, and one doesn't really understand the relationship of the two, that you fundraise to build brand awareness as well as fundraising. You build brand awareness in order to advance the mission as well as getting new donors in the door. So that in our organization, for example, they are completely integrated. We have a senior vice president of marketing and development, fundraising, and then we have teams under that person. But it's one department, and that's fairly unique, I think, in large or small organizations. And there's the success metrics are dependent on each other, and the budgets weave in and out of each other. So I think even if you're a mid or large sized nonprofit organization, think about how you're structured now and how your teams may be in competition for each other, whether subtle or overt, for both budget and success acknowledgement, when they should be leaning on each other for budget and success acknowledgement internally and
Yeah,
externally.
you used the word brand, and it triggered something in my mind. Branding is kind of an advanced concept,
Mm.
but I would think that even before you're going to go back, you're going to start doing your fundraising efforts. You really got to take a step back and know, you have to really have it well defined about why we do what we do and how we do it. And all those key marketing questions. I think that before you say, oh, let's go fundraise, you better have that down, because you got to everybody's got to be talking the talk, and you
Yes.
got to be on the same page. And your organization is not going to move forward unless everybody understands your why. And I'm talking about internally, you know. So that's my first instinct. Then you can start fundraising, and then at the same time you can start looking at the branding strategy of this is what we mean and why we mean it. Is that fair? Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's where I think the marketing folks become critical to this in terms of consistent internal messaging, consistent external messaging. And look, when you think about it, and I can speak for the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, our mission is to dramatically increase the adoptions of children out of North America's foster care system. Behind that, we talk about who these children are, why they're in foster care, what are the myths and misperceptions about them. But our brand is the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption and everything that comes underneath that, which is the mission, which are the programs that we do. But people donate to the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. And so that brand has to be particularly clear and visible. And again, both get to each other. Who are you? The Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. What do you do? X, Y, and Z. Wait, what do you do? This is what we do, but we're the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. So it's nuanced and yet it's really out there and overt about all organizations, no matter what your name is, has to carry who you are. So what your brand is has to carry who you are, and who you are cannot be separate from the name that people will donate.
Well, certainly. I mean, I knew before you came on the first episode, I knew who your organization was. So, so that branding has worked well.
And we're lucky we have a famous name in our brand, but the longer we go, the less known that name is. And so we see a heightened need to continue with that legacy brand awareness as well.
Well, I studied business. I studied the case study of Wendy's. So I that's the other thing too. So I know about the girl on it and all that stuff. So
Sure.
Fair enough. So what has surprised you with how fundraising has changed over the years?
Look, it is a complex field. It is, and there are so many channels for fundraising now. The typical, send a letter and hope you'll get results, which is, a number of years ago, which was kind of the only way people fundraised. There weren't websites and digital links in. That typical send a letter, get results, surprisingly, is still one of the top ways that people engage new donors. And we thought that was kind of dying. It's not. So that's still a critical piece. But in addition to that, this notion of cryptocurrency and people that want to donate cryptocurrency, and what are the platforms to make that easy for your foundation? Digital advertising and digital fundraising on all of the complex platforms, and how do you have that integrated messaging across multi-channels for fundraising? Engaging individuals, groups, corporations, foundations, all of that traditional fundraising, and yet there are a lot of folks out there that no longer understand or subscribe to that sort of traditional fundraising that they're willing to give to help support overhead and internal growth. So there is a lot changing. The competition is still there. There are a lot of needy causes in this country, and yet the dollars absolutely are there. It's finding the right channel in and creating this pathway for new donors, engaging new donors at probably small levels, and then building them up toward perhaps becoming larger donors through nurturing, through development, through constant communication, through individual phone calls, whatever it takes. It is a complex field of relationship building. And that's not even mentioning things like planned giving, the complexities of what it takes to have a planned giving platform so that you can engage potentially long-term donors in their thinking about what they're going to do with their individual wealth. So it really does take someone that understands, may not be able to institute all of those platforms at once, but understands the wide array of opportunities open to nonprofits, but it takes a dedicated effort to be able to nurture. You can't just get donors in the door and then not nurture them, not communicate with them, not give them the recognition that they may say they don't need, but may want. And so figuring out what's behind individual donor aspirations as well.
What percentage of your organization's funding came from the original funder, and what percentage now comes from other funders?
For us personally, yeah. So the wonderful thing that Dave Thomas set up is that as an independent nonprofit organization, we don't get a steady flow of funds from the corporation, for example, profit-based funds. What we do have access into is the franchisees and individual fundraising that they do at the restaurant level, which is significant. As well as certainly some corporate donations and corporate, again, access into the brand and the brand that is the Wendy's company. When we first started, it was clearly 100% of the funding was related to Wendy's or Wendy's partners, franchisees, and affiliates. As we've grown our external fundraising, by external, I mean external from the Wendy's system, because we realized this can't just be a Wendy's burden. And Dave Thomas set it up that way, I think, intentionally to keep us moving, to keep us talking about this issue and this cause, and not just be maybe lazy and being a corporate foundation and we would never have to go out and ask for dollars and expand the conversation. So it was nearly 100% when this organization started 30 years ago. Now it's probably hovering at just about 50-50%.
Wow. Yeah. Off the cuff, weird question. I'll just say it. Did Dave Thomas think that he was a well-adjusted individual because he was adopted?
Sorry, I didn't hear exactly.
Did Dave Thomas feel like he was a well-adjusted person because he was adopted?
He appreciated the story of adoption in his life. He always said that he was where he was because he was adopted. Underneath that, it was a challenging story. And I think he uniquely understood our older children in foster care, because although he was adopted, his adoptive mother passed away when he was relatively young. His father moved frequently for work, and so he was raised by his grandmother, Minnie, and he left home at age 16. So on the surface, it may look like, whatever that phrase is, that he had a challenging life. But what drove him was that understanding of family, that he did have the opportunity for family because he was adopted. And although his life was challenged, he strove to do better things with his life. So I think he would tell you if he was alive today that his success was because of his adoption. But the success of the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption was built on his unique understanding of what children go through when they have to move a lot, when they're raised perhaps by extended family members, when they feel compelled to leave home at an early age to do something different.
You met Dave Thomas?
I did. I didn't have a lot of time with him. I grew up in Columbus, and Wendy's was founded in Columbus. His family lived here, so certainly knew that story. When I started in this position 20 plus years ago, he was relatively ill. He was still on the board, but he was relatively ill, and I only had a very short period of time before he passed away. So had met him, yes. Two of his daughters still sit on the board, so the family's still very connected, and had the benefit of so many people in the Wendy's company, from franchisees to corporate members, who did work with him every day, who did understand him, and was able to pull on them on, would Dave Thomas want this? Are we doing this the way that Dave Thomas would have wanted? So I had the benefit of a lot of people that worked very closely with him.
Last question. So what challenges does your organization now experience when it comes to fundraising and marketing? And what are the things that you see that you guys have struggles with?
I think it was just what we talked about just a few minutes ago, making sure people understand that we are the proud and honored philanthropic partner of the Wendy's system, but we have to do increasingly external fundraising so that the full burden doesn't fall on the Wendy's system. And so not to make sure that people don't think that we're a corporate foundation. And then when we're out there, making sure that people understand this mission, because there's so many myths and misperceptions about children in foster care and families and abuse and neglect, making sure they understand the need behind this mission to get them engaged, even if they weren't adopted, even if they weren't in foster care, that you don't have to have that direct experience to feel strongly about the need for a child. So for us, it's the very reason that we integrate the marketing and fundraising is how do we get over the myths and misperceptions in order to continue to fundraise for these children. And even as we've been very successful at fundraising, to show that the need is not met, that we need to continue to address this in such a way that dollars do have direct impact on the mission. And we work very hard. We're still at a 90% of dollars that come in the door go directly out to programs and services of the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. So struggling to keep that ratio very high when we want to, of course, hire the best possible staff to make this mission work, do the kinds of things that don't come under program services, but prove to the public that their dollars are well used.
So is it fair to say in ensuring that your teams have a sense of urgency?
Yes. Yeah, absolute sense of urgency. What we say every day here, a day in foster care for a child waiting to be adopted is a day of childhood lost that they don't know. So that sense of urgency permeates every team, every individual, every strategic thinking, every activity that we take. Even when we step back and say, wow, we're back from the pandemic, we're all together again now. We need to figure out how to have some fun together. We have to balance that against, is this the right way to use, the right way to use our time? Yes, it is. We've got to be a fully functioning team and still dedicated to the urgency of this mission.
Yeah, I get it. Well, it was really a great podcast, just like our last one. But that's all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank so very much Rita Soronen from Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption for coming on to today's podcast. And if you like today's podcast, please feel free to share it with a friend and also subscribe on your favorite podcasting apps. We are really bringing on we always have great guests. And I just think that if you're an executive director and you listen to the Nonprofit MBA podcast, you're really going to get better at what you do. And also, if you like today's podcast, please give us a 5-star review in the podcasting app to help us get the word out. Those reviews help us get ranked higher. We're in the top 5% of all podcasts in our space right now. And of course, if you're looking for a line of credit for your nonprofit, you can call us at 862-207-4118 or visit our website at nonprofitmbapodcast.com. Rita, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, how would they go about doing that?
They can absolutely reach out at Dave Thomas Foundation. DaveThomasFoundation.org. If they want to get directly to me, that's the best way in, or they can call our 800 line, 800-ASK-DTFA. I'd love talking to folks about, what they're doing and what we're doing and where we can learn from each other.
Great. Thanks for coming on.
It's my pleasure, as always.
So I want to thank all of our listeners out there for doing all the heavy lifting of making the world a better place. I know, Rita's doing her part, and I'm always trying to do my part too. But you guys are out there every single day, and you're out there really making it work. But just don't forget, you have to take care of yourself before you can take care of your family, your kids, your organization, your cause. So make sure you're taking good care of yourself first, and then you'll be good for your cause and for your family. So other than that, I want to wish everybody a great day. Enjoy yourselves. Keep a positive attitude. And thank you for listening.